Hello, I'm Dr. Barbara Cockrell. Harvard Medical School has instituted a new clinical skills assessment system for our medical students. Two major changes occurred as a part of this new system. The first is the incorporation of entrustable professional activities, or EPAs, as defined by the Association of American Medical Colleges. And the second is a new strategy, departmental summative assessments, or DSAs. This is the first in a series of videos in which I interview Dr. John Dalrymple, who is the Director of Clinical Skills Assessment at HMS, and Dr. Ed Hunnard, who is the HMS Dean for Medical Education, to further explain the background, rationale, and structure of the new system. Let's start by just a general description of the new assessment system.
Sure. With the introduction of the new curriculum, the Pathways curriculum, this was seen as a great opportunity to really rethink how clinical skills are assessed. And with that, several considerations came to mind. One was that the third year clerkships, or the PCE, were moved up to the second year. And so the idea of dealing with learners who are now early on in medical school really made us think about the learning environment. The underlying philosophy was really to focus on the learning orientation of teaching students in medicine as opposed to performance orientation. That allows us to really put the students in the center of their learning experience without the pressure of having to perform all the time. When we think about clinical skills education, it is a longitudinal process. It just doesn't happen in a vacuum or in a silo or on one clerkship. It really begins from day one. As they progress into the clerkships, they're assuming more and more responsibility, learning more advanced skills. Ultimately, by the time they graduate, they are then ready to enter residency. So this longitudinal assessments of clinical skills, coupled with the idea of having a learning orientation as opposed to a performance orientation, made us think about better ways of teaching and assessing clinical skills at HMS.
So what was the process that you went through to revamp the assessment system?
We first began with development of a clinical skills assessment working group, which was appointed through the curriculum committee. This was a 6-month process in which several faculty members representing the various stakeholders at Harvard Medical School met on a regular basis to take a overall view of what was going on at Harvard Medical School. And out of that 6-month effort, the clinical skills working group came up with a series of proposals that were submitted to the curriculum committee, who then approved them. And from that was the establishment of the Committee on Assessment.
I think it was even more involved than John just said, because that group also did a lot of national benchmarking, looking at what all the other medical schools in the country were doing, assessing best practices, looking at national trends in competency assessment. So it was a huge amount of work, and I think really led to a fantastic result.
So what are the big changes?
As the PCE, which traditionally was in the third year of medical school, was shifted to the second year, which was one of the big changes in the Pathways curriculum, it gave us a chance to really think about our learners in that second year and their clinical skill development. So one of the big changes was to incorporate a framework, a different framework on how we think about the clinical skills. And that framework is anchored on the AAMC, the Association of American Medical Colleges, entrustable professional activities framework.
I think there were a number of changes. One is trying to move to a more competency-based approach using the AAMC's EPA framework of taking the actual activities that people expect doctors to do and assessing each of those in a longitudinal way so that students can develop and grow and track their progress, and we as the faculty can ensure that they're becoming competent. I think there was also an interesting new balance between formative and summative assessment, trying to make sure that in a developmental sense, students that are earlier in their medical school experience are getting more formative feedback without the pressure to perform and get grades, which will then be used for their residency applications, but balancing that against making sure the residencies get the information they need to help them make their selections.
So one of the big changes, it seems to me, is that in the principal clinical experience, we've gone to satisfactory, unsatisfactory versus the old grading system.
Yeah, the decision to go to satisfactory, unsatisfactory was one where we really wanted to make sure that we provided the best learning environment for the students. Ultimately, several stakeholders, including our clerkship directors, PC directors, and many faculty, came to the decision that in order to support a learning environment, having a satisfactory, unsatisfactory grading in the clerkships was the best way to support our overall philosophy.
Yeah, there were a couple of factors going on at the same time. So one was this frame shifting of the clerkship year earlier. Another was that we are moved in now into a new phase where the students enter the clerkship year in 2 6-month phase shifted groups, with the pathway students entering in the fall and the HST and returning MD PhD students largely entering in the spring. And so in each clerkship you have students who are 6 months ahead and 6 months behind. Now that's a great thing because they're more advanced students who can mentor more junior students in each clerkship. But for grading, the old system we had a kind of forced percentage of people who got that highest grade. To be grading people against one another, as it were, who are 6 month phase shifted really wouldn't have made a lot of sense. So that was another one of the impetuses for rethinking what we were doing.
Residencies often look at clerkship grades to screen student applications. Was there a concern that the satisfactory-unsatisfactory system would hurt students when it came to residency applications?
We wanted to ensure that our students continue to have success in the match and provide what residency programs needed, and came up with a novel concept called the departmental summative assessment. This allowed us to preserve the learning environment in the clerkships while still ensuring that our students get the assessments that residency programs need.
So through the process of developing this new assessment system, what were the problems that were identified? What were we trying to change?
I think one of the major considerations in the curriculum reform at Harvard Medical School was to shift and provide more focus on the learning orientation as opposed to performance orientation. In doing so, our students can really focus on their learning and acquisition of clinical skills as opposed to just focusing on the grade.
Yeah, I think, although the grade itself is satisfactory, unsatisfactory, every student is still getting a formative and summative narrative evaluation. They're getting feedback on all their EPAs. They still take shelf exams, have OSCEs and various mini CEX and oral exams. So they're getting a lot of grades. I think not having the pressure of having an overall single grade that a residency will look at, especially when it might be in the fall of your second year of med school. So it's not that there are no stakes, but it's not that feeling of a performance evaluation, high stakes, trying to promote a learning orientation that I'm here to learn and grow and be able to share what I don't know and not feel like, oh, I have to pretend I already know it all. Everyone knows that the students are there to learn.
And this really aligns with the concept of competency-based medical education and assessment, that we are really monitoring the student's progress over time. It's not just a grade based on a 6-week rotation or a 3-month rotation. It's really how did the student do over time, where they actually have a chance to show and demonstrate their growth and developments over that time frame. That really is what competency-based medical education is all about.
For more information on the HMS assessment system and EPAs in general, please visit these websites.